Next station is FL New Urbanism.
So, what is new urbanism? Well, there's 10 main rules that go along with new urbanism. So, first, walkability, that most daily needs should be within 10 minutes walk of home and work. And then there's connectivity, an interconnected street grid that disperses traffic and makes walking easy. Mixed use and diversity, so a mix of shops, offices, apartments, homes, all within one neighborhood, not separated zoning. Mixed housing, so variety types, sizes, prices, in close proximity to each other. Quality architecture and urban design, so emphasis on beauty, human comfort, and creating a sense of place. Traditional neighborhood structure, which has a discernible center like a plaza or green space and a clear edge with highest density at the core usually. Increased density, buildings placed closer together to make services, transit, and amenities more efficient. Smart transportation, so network of high quality transit that connects cities and streets that prioritize pedestrians and cyclists in particular. Sustainability, so minimizing environmental impact. And then quality of life is just kind of a roll up of all these rules to create a place that improves mental and physical well being as like a core goal. Like the 10-minute walk that I mentioned in the beginning, that's like the fundamental unit of new urbanism is like the pedestrian shed. And this is why a person can like comfortably walk 10 minutes or like 400 to 800 meters to get basically anything that they would need in their daily life. And so the goal of this is that all daily necessities like grocery work, schools, parks should be located within this 4 to 800 meter radius from every house within new urbanism. And so from this, the streets are designed for the person, not the car, which means wide sidewalks, street trees for shade, active frontages like windows and doors rather than just blank walls or like garage doors and stuff like that. And then another key feature of new urbanism is just this transect from rural to urban. New urbanists tend to use a tool called the transect to organize the environment instead of residential or commercial zones. They view the world more as like a gradient of intensity. On the edges is like rural slash natural. Then it gets to suburban slash general urban, and then urban center slash core. Kind of like this radius, Perry's neighborhood sort of thing, where it makes sense where the most density is in the middle and then it kind of radiates out, but in a less car centric scale than like large cities, car dependent cities where have highways shoot suburbs out for miles and miles. This is like a human scale where you can walk from the parks and nature on the outside to the urban core. And then mixed use and diversity. So in a new urbanist neighborhood, you won't find a residential district that has become like a ghost town during the day when everyone's at work. There's always mixed use, and there's even vertical mixed use where a single building might have a coffee shop on the ground floor, offices on the second, and then apartments on the third, something like that. And a key goal is to have attainable housing by mixing like mansions with accessory dwelling units and townhomes and apartments. So this just keeps neighborhoods accessible to people of different ages and incomes. And that's a key goal of new urbanism that's worked into the philosophy. And then the interconnected network, though, so new urbanism kind of hates this typical suburban cul-de-sac where a street won't go anywhere. And they force, like, dead end streets force traffic onto a few massive, like, arterial roads, which creates congestion. And so new urbanism typically uses a grid or modified grid like web, and this disperses traffic and provides pedestrians multiple routes to their destination. And because of this mixed use diversity, there'll be shops along the way, and it makes the whole experience feel a lot better. And then rear alleys are another thing that new urbanism really likes, just to keep the streets beautiful. Cars and trash are tucked away in rear alleys. Density is often like kind of a scary word in planning, but for new urbanists, it's the key to environmentalism. So the denser a place is, the more efficiently services, transport, basically everything can be. And so through using density, they can also increase the sustainability and efficiency of the neighborhood. And so what this actually looks like is that new urbanist developments are made to feel walkable and extremely different from typical suburbs that you might know across America. And new urbanism focuses a lot on placemaking and the overall feel that users of new urbanist spaces get when experiencing the place. So it's more than just cheap housing, GI Bill type housing to house everyone and get everyone out of the city and have their own space. It's making that space nice and actually connected and walkable and sustainable. So it's going a step beyond typical suburbs that we know today, and trying to bring back some of those urbanist elements from like cities that America kind of lost in the 50s. Now for a quick history of New Urbanism. So New Urbanism was born with the construction of Seaside in the early 1980s. Um, that was the first physical manifestation of the movement, and it was born in Seaside, Florida, which was founded in 1981 by Robert Davis, and it was designed by Miami architects Andreas Duani and Elizabeth Plater Zeeberg. I hope I'm saying that right. And this is a completely new neighborhood built in rural northwest Florida near Panama City Beach. Not where you typically expect urbanism movement to sprout, but it did. And the design of this place, as you'll see, it features narrow streets, front porches, a mixture of shops and homes. And the impact was that Seaside proved that people were willing to pay a premium for walkability and traditional aesthetics, which sparked interest among developers nationwide and actually got the private sector on board with this. And then in 1993, the movement became official with the founding of the Congress for the New Urbanism, or CNU. And in the charter, CNU drafted outline principles like transit-oriented development, architectural diversity, and the importance of public realms. So kind of those rules that I explained earlier. This was where they were really formalized and the movement became a formal thing. And then in 1994, the Walt Disney Company launched Celebration Florida, which is now the most famous and perhaps scrutinized new urbanist town, which brought the whole movement into the mainstream spotlight. And then as the 21st century progressed, new urbanism shifted from just building new quaint towns to also fixing existing ones. So like urban infill, which moved more towards revitalizing decaying city centers and like gray field malls. Form-based codes were also introduced, which instead of just saying what a building is, like retail or residential, new urbanists push for codes to dictate how a building looks and actually interacts with the streetscape. And then today, the new urbanist movement, as I mentioned earlier, has kind of become heavily integrated with environmentalism, which argues that walkable density is the most efficient way to lower carbon footprints. So I was actually fortunate enough to visit Seaside. It was, as I mentioned earlier, the first urbanist development, and it was started in 1981. And you might recognize this place from where The Truman Show was filmed. That's kind of its claim to fame outside of the urbanist community. When we went, I was driving there. We were staying in Panama City Beach, but we drove into Seaside. And parking was very hard to find. This might have been due to this concert sort of thing that was happening. But yeah, parking was super hard to find. Tons of traffic everywhere. It was just like kind of a nightmare when we were first getting there. And I think that says a lot about how it's kind of being used now. It's intended to be like an actual residential town where people walk and bike around. And to be fair, there was a lot of walking and biking. But just tourism traffic that I was a part of kind of ruins the street and kind of goes against what they were thinking, I think. But houses were varied, and there were many back streets that weren't even paved, which I thought was really cool. It kind of reminded me of like Key West or something like that. There were roosters everywhere. Tons and tons of people were biking. There were dedicated bike lanes, but people were also just biking in the roads, biking back to their house or their vacation home. The town center was really the star of the show. Had a lot of cool cafes, services, shops. Not huge, but big enough, obviously, for like tourists to visit. But I think that it had a diversity of things that really lived up to the new urbanism principles, where you could get basically all you need there. You wouldn't have to leave to Panama City or surrounding areas to get what you need day to day. And inside of that town center, at the very center, was like a park slash field slash concert area sort of thing, which was being openly used by a bunch of kids. And it was just a really cool sight to see that it was actually being used and it was working, even if those kids were tourists or whatever. Then there was this beach access area across from 30A. So 30A is the main highway that runs along the Gulf Coast in Northwest Florida. And it's kind of been, that whole road has been developed as this new urbanism movement has grown. So across from 30A, on the other side, is the beach, and there's this little area where there's lots of restaurants and shops near the public beach access, which I thought was really cool. And honestly, this might have just been because of that concert thing that was going on, and that was super busy. But it just seemed like 100% tourists there. I mean, I'm not sure what the actual local residents might look like, but just from what I got, I saw that what I thought I saw is just total tourism. And to me, it kind of seemed like a somewhat ritzier Key West. It's very clean, very like utopian looking, but it seems to just be priced out for local residents and mostly vacation homes. And even if there are local residents, I would assume that most of them are just seasonal. They come in the summers, they have multiple homes and stuff like that. And I mean, it makes sense for something this nice with this much of a premium. There isn't a lot of economic opportunity around Seaside to actually draw in real residents, but I'm guessing there's also a lot of retirees and stuff like that. So I don't know. From what I saw, it seemed like very touristed and very over touristed in a way, but who knows? I could be wrong. The next place we went was Rosemary Beach. This was built in 1995 and really learned a lot from the mistakes of Seaside and seems like a more improved version of Seaside. It's a little bit more European based rather than coastal city based. And it had a good amount of parking, although it was along the street and kind of took away from the views. But the back streets really had parking, and there's a lot of public free parking even in front of people's houses, which was really nice. But yeah, they were a little bit more generous in parking here, which was great for us when we were driving in and visiting. But I mean, there's parking along basically every street, and that definitely took away from the urbanist kind of feel of it. Like I was saying earlier with the rules of urbanism, they typically want the back alleys for parking, but seems like they didn't really do that here. It really reminded me of Austria a bit and like Germany, the architecture, but almost a more beachy version of that. And it was definitely bigger than Seaside. The main shopping street had a good mixed use density and lots of expensive stores. I got a $70 Rosemary Beach sweater. So it's very like boutique-y type of stores, but I mean, really cool stuff, great for tourists. But there was also a lot of like stuff like a hair salon and stuff, obviously for local residents. There were, again, lots of pedestrians and lots of bikes. 30A has a really great bike path and sidewalk, so people go along 30A to all these different towns, and it's really an easy way to commute between places like Rosemary Beach and Seaside on bikes. It was very lush. The tree cover was absolutely amazing. We were there kind of in a colder part, but it's still Florida, colder part of the year. But the tree cover was super nice. Basically, all the roads were very shaded. The one really big downside, what I thought, was that there was no public beach access. You had to have like a resident thing to get to the beach. And I guess they probably did this to protect it from getting super, super touristed like Seaside. But I think it also takes away from like the public utility of the city center, which you can't get to one of the greatest, most valuable assets of the city, which is the beach, unless you, like, I'm assuming, pay some monthly membership or something, like a residential thing. So that was definitely a downside, but I might be able to see why they did it. And Route 38 again cuts right through, but it's very pedestrianized, lots of crossings, slow traffic speed, so it's not really as big of a nuisance as you'd think a highway cutting through the middle of this new urbanism development is. Um, and it seemed like, again, mostly tourists, but there were definitely some locals, and I personally would love to live here someday. It was very expensive, but definitely worth the price, in my opinion, even though you're kind of out in rural, well, outside of these developments, it's rural Northwest Florida. But definitely really cool place that I would definitely consider living one day. And I mean, as you can see from the videos, it's really a pretty just whole area, and there's lots of stuff to do despite being in Northwest Florida in the Panhandle. And then right next to Rosemary Beach, we walked to Alley's Beach, which was built in 2004, but it's still being expanded, and some of the satellite imagery on Google Maps still isn't even updated. It's very, very new. And it was really white, really uniform Greek-looking houses. The streets were super clean, not super lush, but very rich looking, very fancy, very nice. But it was admittedly kind of a ghost town when we were there in the middle of a weekday. So definitely not as much mixed use as most new urbanism areas. But definitely very quaint, residential, quiet type of thing. And there were like people there, locals there fishing. So yeah, definitely a great looking place. There were stores along 30A, like that were part of Alley's Beach. But again, boutiques, fancy type of stores, but definitely some locals there as well. And definitely all you would really need if you were living there. And then there was a park, like this great, super lush, like natural park on the back of it that separated the houses from the regional highway in the further away from the beach. And that was really cool. It definitely goes with the natural outskirts of new urbanism development. Then there was a public pool, this really fancy looking gym, stuff like that. And it was definitely a smaller development than the other two, but I mean, still expanding, and definitely seems like more of a wealthy area, like purposely for wealthy people. I definitely don't see the mixed incomes living there, mixed use of housing types, stuff like that. It seemed very much solely for wealthy individuals. So now we're going to get into a few of the interviews I did with planners from this region, just to learn more about the region and the whole movement. So first is Alara Mills Gutcher. She is the president of the American Planning Association Florida chapter and is a longtime planner in the Panama City or just Northwest Florida area. And she has a connection to the Seaside Institute, which you'll hear more about in the interview. So, did you have involvement with, like, some sort of involvement with the Seaside Institute? I kind of remember you mentioning that in our Zoom.
Yeah, I worked for them briefly as a very young planner before I worked in any kind of governmental situation. Mm-hmm. So I was there maybe, I don't even know if it was a year, it might have been around a year, just helping. And so the Seaside Institute is an educational foundation type. So they held a lot of symposiums and conferences. So it wasn't like they were actually planning anything. They were really an outreach and educational organization. So after Seaside, Andres Dewani and Elizabeth Slater-Snyford turned to trying to create a pattern book per se, and they call it Transect, the Transect design. So you should look into that too, which is, I believe, how these TND developments are aiming. They're aiming for this kind of thing, where you have the main street and the commercial area. As you tier out, the lots get larger, the housing might get bigger. But look into Transect development too, because of the pattern books. There's some pattern books out there that can show you kind of what the TND is trying to achieve. I think too, and maybe it's just because it's the coastal part of Florida, but the TNDs in Walton County are not necessarily homesteaded properties, so people aren't really living there full time. There might be a sprinkling, but they've really all become like resort type destinations.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I saw, and like
That's definitely not an issue in Gainesville, but yeah, something there, like, they all seemed like Airbnbs or like timeshares or stuff like that. So that's kind of,
Right.
I don't know if I'd say disappointing, but I probably not what they intended it to be.
I agree. I don't think they intended it to be that, and it's become that. So now nothing is really affordable and nothing is permanent, and so that's the challenge I think anywhere in Florida these days, trying to figure out that balance for the working class.
Next is Kristen Schell, who Alara referred me to. She's currently the Director of Growth Management at the Okaloosa County Planning Office, but she has years of both public and private planning experience in the Northwest Florida region.
Well, I was the planning. I was the deputy planning director in Walton County for 8 years, so that's probably why Aurora sent you to me. Which Walton County is where the birthplace of new urbanism, or what they claim to be, seaside. CNU lays claim to that being sort of the genesis for the whole concept, is the seaside development, which is there in South Walton. Now, of course, it's an active development, so, there are things going on there changing, and, development still being approved in Seaside, and then also, you've got the other new urbanist communities in South Walton, Alice Beach, and Rosemary Beach.
Yeah.
So, I was sort of the regulator over those for 8 years.
Interesting. Yeah, I recently visited like Northwest Florida for the first time, like, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, and I visited Seaside, Rosemary Beach, Alice Beach, and they were all like super interesting, and like I visited to get some footage for this video, but then also just like see it, and I thought it was really amazing. Like, you could tell like just how different these developments are. Like, it went just from like highways with like a couple gas stations and like suburban developments on it to like the Seaside, which is like this pretty amazing walkable area. I was like super impressed, and that's kind of what started like the idea for this video.
Yeah. Well, when Seaside was built in the early 80s and conceptualized late 70s, I think, there was nothing there. So it was pretty revolutionary for its time for that area, especially, and just the whole concept in general was pretty new. And, the kind of thinking that way about new developments. Since then they've evolved, to, retrofitting suburbs, to, building new urbanism principles into our land development codes for existing urban areas, kind of returning areas to what they may have been, prior to suburbanization. So that whole concept has evolved massively, since then. And you have, local governments really running the gamut on all in to not in at all on new urbanism concepts. I think most local governments that are interested in that type of development realize that, and they've kind of moved on and modified their codes. It's more the rare case now, more of a fight on infill modification than it is allowing like a new greenfield, new urbanist development to happen. I think pretty much anywhere you can get one to happen if you have a developer that wants to put that kind of money into a development.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, do you think there was like a specific reason why new urbanism like is thought to have like started in Florida, specifically like Walton County? Like, was there something that really allowed that, or was it kind of just a thing of chance?
Well, I think that Mr. Davis, Robert Davis, his family had left him this property, and I do think he had a vision. It was his original sort of vision to create this town.
So what were some specific projects that you worked on during your time at Walton County? Any like that relate specifically to the new urbanist developments?
Well, Seaside ironically faced challenges due to its popularity. So the parking situation became untenable, and they had to actually close the town center circle there to automobiles. When we did traffic studies, everybody that goes to South Walton goes to Seaside. It kind of became the unofficial downtown South Walton, and it wasn't meant for that. It wasn't built for that. To have that many vehicles and cars, so it kind of became a challenge. So we worked together with Seaside on that. They were also finishing a final phase in there for the sort of, I don't know what they called it, and I'm losing my terms here now, but they redesigned the sort of promenade between the amphitheater and the beach. And so we had to work with them from a public works standpoint and county standpoint on the road, which 30A is a county road.
Yeah.
To get that final phase of the vision. It actually was part of the original construction plans, or design plans, but it was just finally getting done here lately. So it wasn't built out, essentially. So we kept working on getting it built out.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. And the parking thing you were saying, or the traffic, that was something that I definitely encountered, and they were having like some sort of concert while I was there, so I'll give them that. But it took us a while to find parking, but it was obviously like frustrating, but I think that it's like a good way also to just encourage other modes of transport. But something that me and Alara talked about was that these developments have kind of become like tourist attractions, and a lot of the actual residents have been like priced out by like Airbnbs and like other just tourist type of infrastructure.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
That wasn't the original vision for Seaside. The original vision was it was going to be a place where people lived and worked, and that's really not what it is today. It's a vacation home tourism spot.
Yeah,
I'm sure that that's not true of like some of the other communities. There's some communities in South Alabama too that, those same designers, DPZ, and some of the same original guys, they've built communities all over the country. They're in Seattle. They're in there's a couple over in South Alabama. Fairhope actually has quite a bit of new urbanism going on. It's all over. These big communities that they build. You could argue that that's not a full integration of the concept, really. It's easy to build a new urbanist community on a greenfield at very high, expensive price points. It's harder to integrate the concepts into existing urban fabric. They've done more with that. The criticisms of new urbanism they've tried to address, at least CNU has, mainly being environmental. They originally weren't very considerate of the natural environment.
Yeah.
Really. And then they also were criticized on the exclusivity side of things, things being, this is la la land and for rich people and all that good stuff. And I think they've tried to balance that over the years. They've done some new environmental stuff. They've done some more talking about affordable housing and how you integrate different housing types into development, but in a place like Seaside, even if it's a 900 square foot accessory apartment, it's, 1.2 million, right?
Yeah.
It honestly, I haven't seen a lot of those big new urbanism communities. I don't care where they are, be real affordable. They just because they're desirable, when you build something like that, it's nice and people want to live there. And so they command a price, and they're also expensive to build. Most traditional developers, it's a rare developer that wants to do that. It's not like they're all jumping up and down to build that type of community, because they just don't make as much money off of that as they do off of traditional development.
Yeah.
Unless they can command those exorbitant prices. And so it's kind of a trap in that way. So the real challenge is, how do you get some of those concepts integrated into, and some cities like, look at St. Petersburg, and some cities in Florida, Mount Dora, have been real successful in getting the entire local government organization to buy into these concepts. And that's a challenge, because you got to get your fire department on board. You got to get your public works people on board, your engineers. They don't usually want to narrow roads and reduce parking.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the commissioners don't want to do that. The elected officials, they don't want to deal with citizens that are mad about parking or different things that have to be done. But some communities have been super successful. Yeah.
So is that like the direction that you see, like, that you either see or you want to see new urbanism go, where it's more retrofitting cities and actually creating like diverse, affordable, like better designed cities? Or are you still seeing a lot of like actual developments pop up, like greenfield developments?
I don't push for it. Like, here in Okaloosa County, around the Crestview area where all of our development is going, it's going there because it's affordable. And our elected officials want affordable housing to have places where our military personnel can live. So it wouldn't be very politically popular for me to start saying, hey, you guys got to build seasides out there in Crestview. It just wouldn't work, Now, Fort Walton Beach is doing a redesign they're trying to move a highway out of their downtown and bring back their, waterfront downtown area and create a walkable, enjoyable place to be. And I think they're using a lot of new urbanism concepts in that project, and it's driven mostly by their CRA. And I think it's great. It's an appropriate place for it. They've already got an eclectic mix of uses down there. They've already got mixed housing types. They just need to get that big highway out of the middle of their downtown, which was a horrible decision, in the beginning, but it is what it is. DOT does a lot of stuff like that. So, it's a costing a lot of money, and they've been trying for years and years, and they're finally getting some traction on it, and I think it's going to happen. So it's a great way to frame and to make recommendations for what's happening down there. And I think they're doing a good job with it, that city. So it just depends on the context and where you're at. Niceville has sort of a new urbanism project going on in their landing, where they're trying to integrate some commercial into a predominantly residential area, create kind of a downtown walkable area on their waterfront, place for people to gather. There's a lot of, I like the concepts of placemaking, and I don't know if you've looked at that very much, but it, to me, resonates more sometimes than new urbanism does, because it gives people a way to understand what new urbanism is trying to accomplish. There's a group, the International Placemaking Collective. They have international conferences every year, and they do a really good job of talking about how we create places for people to basically do life together, which is even more important in today's age of social media and technology, and where we just don't get out of our houses and, go interact with people. But they're trying to do that down there in Niceville. So it's another little project that has those pieces, but is not, nobody's really going around talking about, this is a new urbanist project, but it is, and so is the one going on in downtown Fort Walton. Yeah, I mean, there are those concepts. If you, kind of integrate them into your code, you're going to end up with a better place for people to live and, work and interact with each other, than, get around, move around. A lot of people are looking for that type of lifestyle. they're looking to be in an urban area where they have, close by entertainment, amenities, work, all of that. And it's, sometimes you got to go back and look at the urban core and say, all right, well, what have we done wrong here? What are we missing? Why is this not a place where people want to walk, or why is this not a place where people want to live? In the economy right now, I'm not seeing a lot of that. Downtown Pensacola's got some big projects going on, but they're pretty savvy in terms of, making those changes. They're changing Palafox and all of that. Those are also new urbanism concepts that are being brought in. So you got Panama City, Pensacola, Niceville, Fort Walton, all of these cities doing things along those lines. And they're doing a great job with it. Most of them, a lot of them use their community redevelopment agencies to sort of facilitate that, because that agency can bring together economic development money and economic development foresight into their local government regulatory process. They're a good vehicle to do that.
Interesting.
So now moving away from the Northwest Florida area, which was really the birth of New Urbanism. New Urbanism has spread all across Florida and America now. The first big one outside of Northwest Florida was Celebration, which was the Disney one in Orlando, Florida. It's often called the town that Disney built, and it serves as a high-profile case study for how the 20th century entertainment design principles can be used to engineer 21st century social and urban life. It was built in 1996, and Disney managed the town through its subsidiary, the Celebration Company, until 2004, when it began divesting control to private owners and community development district. So it's not quite as privatized anymore, like corporate privatized by Disney, but that's how it came to be. And I haven't been there personally, but I think it's definitely an interesting case study, and it's one of the few examples that is not on like a coastal thing, so that definitely brings in a whole different feel. But from what I've seen in videos and stuff like that, it seems like a very cool place, and definitely somewhere I'd want to check out eventually. But it was kind of designed to be the antithesis of the sprawling Florida suburbs surrounding it, and it follows the movement's core rules strictly. So going back to those rules, the pedestrian shed. So the town is divided into villages, each with its own park or center, ensuring that no resident is more than a short walk away from public space. They have alleys behind the homes, which allows the front of the house to feature large porches close to the sidewalk, which kind of encourages like a neighborhood feel. And then the mixed-use core, which is the Market Street area, combines retail on the ground floor with apartments above overlooking a central lake. So very dense core. And then the architectural diversity, it's very clear in any photos or videos you'll see. Unlike a typical subdivision with 3 models, Celebration used 6 distinct styles: classical, colonial revival, French, country, coastal, Mediterranean, and Victorian, to create the illusion of a town that grew organically over time. The real controversy with Celebration is just the Disney controversy, that while praised for its walkability, Celebration is criticized for being too perfect, and critics argue that its strict homeowners association rules, which can dictate everything from the height of your grass to whether you can have a visible garden hose, kind of creates a sanitized version of the urban life that feels more like a movie set than a real city. Now moving on to Gainesville, Florida, which is some more of the non-coastal new urbanism that I'm able to see because I'm living there, going to the University of Florida. So starting off, kind of on the edge of new urbanism. Some might consider it, some might not, but it definitely draws from some of the principles of new urbanism. The Tioga Town Center was built in the early 2000s. It's still expanding. It's located on the far western edge of Gainesville, but its design and atmosphere, the center is built on the principles of walkability and vertical mixed use. So it features a central outdoor plaza known as the Square, which is surrounded by pedestrian-friendly streetscape with wide sidewalks and a covered amphitheater. And then the vertical integration, so many buildings feature retail or office space on the ground floor, with luxury apartments known as the Flats located above. The architectural style emphasizes the small town charm with modern amenities, creating a cohesive and aesthetically pleasing environment for both residents and visitors. And the flats, like I mentioned just now at Tioga, these are award-winning apartments that offer residents direct access to all the center's amenities, emphasizing a live, shop, dine, play lifestyle, which kind of goes along with New Urbanism principles. So it's definitely not super accessible and connected to the rest of Gainesville. There is a bus line that runs all the way out there, and I think that's definitely great. And it's really meant just as a neighborhood in its of itself, not really connected to the rest of Gainesville. But I think that's kind of a good thing. If you're not living there and you want to get there, you're probably going to drive unless you're taking the not super often bus. But if you're living there, it seems like a great place and definitely offers an affordable version of New Urbanism that if you really don't care about your surrounding location all that much, it's a great place and it offers some great urbanism in the middle of Central Florida. Moving on to Hale Plantation, it was built originally in 1854, but it was remodeled into a new urbanist development in the 1970s. It's a 1,700-acre unincorporated community in the southwest of Gainesville, again, very much on the edge of Gainesville, that serves as a landmark example of New Urbanism. It was designed to be a traditional town rather than a standard suburban subdivision, which prioritized a self-containing lifestyle where residents can live, work, and play in a walkable environment. Very much New Urbanism. The community is anchored by the Hale Village Center, which is a meticulously planned downtown area that embodies many of these New Urbanism principles. So its connection is that it was an early adopter of several core New Urbanist concepts, although it wasn't technically the birth of New Urbanism, although it did happen before Seaside. It definitely was a precursor and something that led up to Seaside. And it had to write often its own development standards to bypass the conventional suburban zoning codes of the time. So definitely very innovative in that sense. The village center is designed so that its most distant edges are roughly a 5-minute walk from the core, which creates a high-density human-scale hub. It's a mixed-use development, so features vertical integration, interconnected network with, instead of modern cul-de-sacs, the community uses a network of tree-lined streets and over 13 miles of walking and biking trails that connect its 50-plus micro-neighborhoods. So these micro-neighborhoods appear very much more as the traditional American suburban cul-de-sac kind of development, but they are connected to the village center and they encourage walking and biking, which I think a lot of residents do, because there is, again, not a ton of parking in the center, which I think in this case is a great thing, because on weekends when there's the farmers market there, which is kind of the flagship event that brings students and other people from actual Gainesville in here, parking is kind of hard to come by, but they make it work and you're always able to find parking. But I think residents are definitely encouraged by the lack of parking to bike and walk, which I think is a great thing. So the village center serves as the social heart of the community, which features cobblestone streets, brick sidewalks, variety of local businesses, home to popular spots like Volcanic Sushi and Sake, Patty Cakes Cafe, and the Queen's Arm Tavern. As I mentioned, it hosts the weekly Saturday Farmers Market and annual events like Oktoberfest. And there's natural integration, so despite its density, the community preserves large swaths of hardwood forest and green space, with power lines buried underground to maintain the spectacular tree canopy, which I think is definitely great. Residents have access to the Hawkstone Country Club, formerly Hale Plantation Golf and Country Club, which features a Gary Player Design Championship golf course, tennis courts, and swimming pools. So like very much wealthy, high class type of community country club that they have access to. But again, I think it's mostly wealthy type of residents, but definitely there's some affordable housing here. And I think that because of its location on the edge of Gainesville, Florida, that definitely helps bring the costs down. And I think that regular people are definitely able to afford this area or at least get close to it. And again, there's a bus that runs here pretty infrequently, but it does run. And then there's the historic Hale Homestead, which is located within the community. And this is the 1856 home. And it's a historic museum famous for its talking walls, where the original Hale family and their guests wrote more than 12,500 words on the plaster. It's kind of a weird, like, slave owner, weird family story that I'm not going to get into, but it's an interesting historic place that kind of acts as the origin of this whole community. And I think the farmers market is great. That's what I've been there for, but it seems like an interesting place to live. I don't know if I would ever live there, but the farmers market brings in businesses from all over and great local businesses every weekend. So I think that's definitely one of the best amenities of it, and that's what I was able to see. But just driving around it, it kind of reminds you of like Savannah, Georgia, stuff like that, where very southern, but it definitely has some great new urbanism elements, and I think is a great example of new urbanism away from a coastline and that's more affordable. My thoughts on new urbanism overall, or more specifically in Florida, I think that it's a great idea. It's definitely way better than traditional American suburbs. I've kind of come to hate traditional American suburbs and the whole highway sprawling in the 1950s, and I think most urbanists would hate that too. And this definitely offers a more realistic, but also very much better designed alternative to those than I think a lot of other alternative proposals. They're kind of way far out, and they're definitely more high-end, far-out goals. But I think these new urbanism principles are pretty easy to design and implement. They are proven, and I think developers are very much open to them, and it's not some super, super innovative thing. It's based on like traditional urbanist principles, just kind of applied to the modern day American suburbs. But I think that actually getting these built or just redoing and improving current suburbs, I think it has those dual functions, which is great and definitely makes it very much applicable to like basically all of America. It seems to work. I mean, although the current full developments are very touristed, I mean, these are beach towns in the Gulf Coast of Florida, so it kind of makes sense. But the other ones that I spoke about, it seems to work. Lots of local residents living there. They bring in tourists and outsiders for events, but I think that just brings in the businesses as well, so it's kind of a trade-off. But I think it seems to work, and people seem to actually use their bikes or walk to places when they're living in these places, and it's really just the outsiders who are driving into these places. And even in a place like Florida where the weather is great most of the year, but then during the summer it's very hot and people would be very discouraged from walking or biking, I think people still do it. The tree cover definitely helps. And I think that this could be applied to really anywhere in the U.S. I don't think it has to be on a Florida beach town or in the weather of Florida. I think that even in places like colder places, people can walk and bike still. They just have to dress differently. But I think tree cover can still help with snow and stuff like that. And that although it's not organic, that kind of might be the only option in like American capitalism. Like, I don't know. I think that organic growth definitely preferable, but this inorganic growth that are these huge planned unit developments, I think they do work, and I think that it seems like they have more success and more of an easy time actually getting built and funded by private developers who actually get to control more of the development and are involved in like the whole development. So they're there from start to finish instead of being there for just a portion and then it might fail or stuff like that. So I think that although organic growth is preferable, I don't think the inorganic growth has a huge effect on the feel of these places. And I think they feel good, and it kind of helps with the uniform design and actually getting the principles built, because they're going to build the street grid and all that in one go instead of building some of it and then a different developer comes in later and just builds typical American suburbs nearby. This really ensures that the principles of new urbanism get built into these places. So I don't think it's a huge downside, and I think it just might be the best option for like an America's current like capitalist society. And although it's expensive, it creates a great place for surrounding areas, and if it continues to spread, it may become more affordable. So a lot of these places that I highlighted today, they are more expensive. People want to pay the premium to live in a nice place like this. But I think as it becomes more common, people, like, there'll be more supply to match the demand, and hopefully that'll drive down the cost of living there. And then also, a lot of these places, it's Florida. A lot of retirees are going to go there, drive up the price. A lot of tourists or vacation homes, vacation rentals, driving up the price in like the beach towns. So I think that in the future, and even if it's maybe less of these planned unit developments, more just improving existing neighborhoods, I think it does definitely work to gentrify, but improve the places, and they are going to be more expensive. Like, people will want to pay more to live in a place like that than I think a crappy like random suburb. But I see it as something that definitely can be worked on, and I think something that'll get better if the movement continues to expand. And it's kind of a sad fact that most Americans want to live in the suburbs after they have a family. I mean, it makes sense. But new urbanism offers a great suburban design that could be implemented around large American cities. So I definitely think that implementing this in a large city, I mean, Orlando is kind of a large city, but at the time it was built, it wasn't nearly as big. But I think trying this out in like a neighborhood where it's an actual planned unit development, say in some empty neighborhood in Detroit, would be really interesting. And seeing how that goes, and seeing how this could be a tool for urban revitalization, I think that could be definitely another future for the movement. And it seems especially well suited to Florida due to the great walking and weather and like coastal/touristic feel that seems to come with the successful examples of it. So I hope that it continues to spread around Florida. I think it's great for Florida. It makes sense that it started and has been successful in Florida. But yeah, I really hope that this movement continues to grow. I'm a big supporter of it. There are some people who criticize it, but I definitely enjoyed my time visiting these different new urbanism areas. And yeah, hopefully it continues to expand and continues to be a successful movement. Special thank you for Alara and Kristen for their help with this video. I learned a lot, and they helped me with my research, and it was just great to get an interview into this video. And then thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed.